Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Andriy Shevchenko. On behalf of Mediacentrу Ukraine, I would like to welcome all the journalists covering our fight for freedom. Yesterday, the international agency responsible for security of the nuclear facility published a report following the visit of the delegation to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is located in the area temporarily occupied by the Russians. The report has evoked a number of impressions and feelings in Ukraine. On the one hand, the report does record the obvious risks that the Russian occupation creates for nuclear security. On the other hand, the report is criticized for giving too few recommendations about how to handle it and wasn't tough enough in assessing the role of the Russian Federation. We'll discuss the report and the situation in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant with Oleh Korikov, who is the acting chairman of the Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine. Oleh, so what are your impressions of the IAEA report? Look, the mere fact that the mission has happened to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is a good starting point. It happened in very difficult context as the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is occupied by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The risks were high. The fact that General Director of the IAEA, Rafael Mariano Grossi, and others have launched the mission was a very brave decision to make on their part. Importantly, considering the report, the mission has put down very important violations of the nuclear safety that are happening now in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and they've been provoked by the occupation of the facility. The mission has recorded the fact of the stay of the Russian military and Russian military hardware in the number 1 and number 2 block machine halls, turbine halls. I cannot find the right definition for the act. It's the most blatant violation. The mission has also reported the unsanctioned presence of the Rosatom and the Russian military at the facility. This is reflected in the report. The report talks of the need to bring out the people and the hardware from the area where they can jeopardize the security, and also the emergency response system and the emergency readiness. The facility is run by the Ukrainian Ukrinform. It is underscored that the personnel is working under extreme stress and pressure in most difficult conditions, and the representatives of Rosatom are meddling in the operations. The supply chains have been disrupted to the nuclear facility. This needs to be rectified, and these steps are suggested. The mission has confirmed that Ukraine is abiding by its commitments, and despite the military aggression of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, Ukraine bears no blame. Logistically, it was underlined in the report that it is very important to supply the diesel fuel should the power supply be disrupted, as it's directly connected to the security of the facility. The report says that the mission has seen violation of all these 7 key prerequisites of nuclear security at the site. And the phrase that caught my attention was, for the first time in the history of humanity, the military action have taken out the nuclear facility. Is it a tough assessment for the language of the International Atomic Energy Agency? As the Director General of the IAEA is a diplomat, and he is a diplomat, first and foremost, and not an engineer like self, the assessment is quite firm for a diplomat, but we expected a more straightforward language. But this is what they came out with. We need to rather focus on the ongoing cooperation leading to demilitarization, deoccupation, and return of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to the full control of the Ukrainian authorities. Some of the items we have not seen in the report is a clear identification of Russia as the culprit of the situation. The report doesn't say anything about the legal vacuum that the station has ended up in because the license terms issued to the nuclear power plant are not fulfilled and cannot be complied with. So, do you see any specific steps that can be done in near future to ensure security of this nuclear site? Look, I've watched the Security Council session of the United Nations, and suggestions were made by the General Director of the IAEA to set up a containment area on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's very important to consider this suggestion. It calls for examination. If it's about demilitarization, then Ukraine stands prepared, and we, as the state inspection for nuclear and radiation safety, stand prepared to contribute and to come up with our vision. But that calls for examination. We see that the solution to the problem lies in demilitarization, and therefore Mr. Grossi's suggestion looks optimistic. And another important component is that the mission has stayed on. There are people staying on in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The inspectors of the International Atomic Energy Agency are staying there as an additional safety guarantee. So, this is the way we see the future. As you're saying, a demilitarized area at the site and around the site. So far, it is just goodwill and the vision of the IAEA, or is it a feasible goal to be achieved in some kind of foreseeable future? In this context, we need to say that for now, this zone isn't feasible. We will talk to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and he stated that we will make progress to enlarge the mandate of the international organization for it to have the ability to create conditions whereby Russia would accept the demilitarization and deoccupation of the territory of the nuclear power plant. What will it mean in practice? What will this expanded mandate mean? It's hard to give you any factual details, as I'm an engineer, I'm not a diplomat, but within our competence, we will submit the relevant proposals. It's a unique problem. It's unprecedented problem. For the first time in humanity, a nuclear power plant has come under military occupation, and there are no templates we could follow. So we will have to come out with novel, tailor-made mechanisms. How would you assess the level of threat as of now? Look, the thing is, the nuclear power plant has been disconnected from the grid. So it's disconnected from the Ukrainian power grid. So the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant produces power for its own needs independently to supply the power for the technological safety, the security systems, in order to sustain the operation of the hardware of the site. This is a special mode, but further deterioration of the situation when the grid would remain disconnected from the grid could lead to the situation where we would be forced to exploit the reserve diesel power plants to power our security systems, and the stocks of diesel fuel in times of war are very difficult to replenish. These are 4 cisterns of diesel fuel we need per 24 hours. It's very difficult to bring this volume of petrol through the line of contact, and potentially we can find ourselves in a predicament where we would run out of diesel, and this can lead to the accident where the active zone could be impaired of the reactor with the leakage of radioactive products into the environment. And that would have the consequences for the Ukrainian territory, but definitely it will have impact further beyond the Ukrainian borders. We have to make sure we prevent this, so we need to demilitarize, deoccupy, restore the power supply to the plant, and supply of the diesel fuel needs to be enabled, and all the other stations to bring the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant back into safety operation. What is happening to the power which is not produced at the nuclear power site? We are producing the power and consuming it for our own needs. So there are machine mechanisms with the electric gear that have to be made, kept running to ensure the security of the energy blocks. We need to enable the cooling of the spent rods. So the power isn't feeding power outside. This is exactly the case because resulting from the hostilities, the shelling, the damage has been inflicted to the all 4 lines feeding power to the nuclear power plant, even the connection lines with the thermal power plant, and the lines from the thermal power station have been damaged too. Are you considering the option of bringing the nuclear power plant to a halt? We are considering this scenario. If the pretexts come in place, when the nuclear power plant will have to be brought to a halt, the energy block number 6 will be stopped. And my last question, what is the logic of the Russian Federation about? Is it an attempt to grab an important industrial facility? Are they trying to pursue the agenda of supplying electricity to the occupied territory? Is it about nuclear blackmail? What are they after? Look, it's hard to predict what a nuclear terrorist would do. It's a state to take control of a nuclear facility, setting a precedent for the world. Some other nuclear facilities were also targeted in the Chernobyl exclusion area, which is yet another nuclear power plant. This territory was liberated and the facility was liberated too. So it is difficult to predict or read the minds, but we know what the Russian Federation is after. They are planning to steal the nuclear power plant and the power it produces by connecting the nuclear power plant to the Russian grid. Theoretically, it is feasible, but the power has to be disconnected in the intermediary stage. So now the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been disconnected from the Ukrainian grid altogether. And this might be one of the steps in order to reconnect it to the Russian grid. But I will not go into any further comment on this. As an ape with a grenade is difficult to predict. Oleh Korikov, acting chairman of the Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to our hero. Please follow the announcements of the Media Center and stand